Hello everybody and welcome to the United Stand, and it's a special one tonight because I want to talk about Jose Mourinho and his toughest test, but I don't really want to talk too much about it because we've got a guest on tonight. We've got Phil Brown on. Phil, can you hear me?
Yes, mate, I can hear you loud and clear.
Now, this is a guy that many of you probably do follow on Twitter, and we'll get all that shouted out very soon. But I did a podcast with Phil a couple of nights ago on Beyond the Pitch podcast. I've left the link in the video description. It's one of the best things I've done. Really enjoyed it. And if you want to know a little bit more about the United Stand, about the background of it, and a bit about United as well, do give it a listen. It's just one click and you're away. But I've asked Phil, as part of that, to come back on the show because I don't really follow anybody on YouTube or anything like that. I don't really watch much. But in relation to Phil, I've been following him for a few years, and I really do like a lot of the short videos he sort of does on Twitter and Periscope around the club. Because without question, I think as far as I'm concerned, certainly anyway, he does have sort of contacts around the club. So, and he does get more right than he does wrong, which I think in a journalist census, I think if you're getting over 60% right, you're doing a great job anyway. So,
thank you.
First question, Phil, is going to be around Jose Mourinho. Toughest test yet, a lot of people are saying that. We're back after this international break. Two questions really. Has Mourinho been let down by this board, and what do you feel his future is at Manchester United?
There's no question he's been let down. I mean, you can point to the players that have been signed as mitigation that Woodwards supported him. But when it comes to Mourinho and the evaluation of his relationship with the board, you hire Mourinho to bring success to your football club. You trust him unequivocally. And if you look at his career, wherever he's been, he's brought success. So why overrule him? Why decide that this player isn't good enough based on the opinion of an investment banker? If we get into these squabbles, if Mourinho wants to overrule Woodward on the business side, then he'd be completely wrong. And for Ed Woodward to then pick and choose what players he wants to sign based on God knows what criteria, there's no question he's been let down. There's no question Perisic would have been an improvement for United. There's no question if he'd have gotten any of the centre-halves that he asked for, we'd be seeing a much better team. And we're seeing the consequences of Mourinho being let down. And ultimately, Mark, what you do is you give him excuses now for Mourinho. Mourinho would be well within his rights to say, I wasn't supported properly. And regardless of what you think of him, whoever United bring in, they have to support him. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah, because I think, just very quickly, I think I remember that first summer under David Moyes, and David Moyes was always labelled as being indecisive, but it almost has the echoes of that first summer with David Moyes, and I don't really know whether there are any parallels, and maybe you do, whereby we were linked to a lot of players, and ultimately we came out of it with just Fellaini, and I know we got Fred, Dalot, and a third-choice goalkeeper, but I think many Manchester United fans expected a lot more from the summer, and I know the summer's gone. But it is something, as Gary Neville said, he'd love United to be in a title race this season, hang on until January, get a couple of signings in, but realistically he doesn't think it's going to happen. What is it that? Do you think Woodward just decided, I don't like your targets? Is that the only reason we didn't pull in the players we wanted to over the summer?
Well, you only can judge Woodward on his own words. And, if you look at, just to go back to the David Moyes comparison, David Moyes made a major mistake thinking that a 6-year contract meant 6 years and he was actually going to be there for that length of time with immediate success. Football club needed to be rebuilt, of course, and he was way too slow in going about that. There was also the naivete of Ed Woodward in that job. He'd never done it before. United really botched the transition, not just to Ferguson, but also the transition from Gill, who has an undeserved exceptional reputation. It's revisionism at its finest. But so the club have recruited very poorly. And the scouting network is appalling, hence the reason why we used, if you remember, David Moyes would do a lot of the scouting on his own. It seemed like every week he was away on a scouting mission. Van Gaal didn't trust the scouting either, which is why you saw players like Daley Blind, which is why you saw players like Memphis Depay, Bastian Schweinsteiger, players that Van Gaal knew and trusted because he didn't trust United scouting. And Mourinho, who's much more decisive, who had much more notice that he was getting the job, had much more time to prepare for the job, but again is let down. So I think that when you've got Woodward leaking to the media, and in my opinion, sorry for the long answer, but when the leak that he gave on deadline day, which he was off the cuff, he bumped into a bunch of journalists inside Old Trafford, and he briefed them off the record. And I think, once again, that brief is an illustration of the problems in that position, because here is a guy leaking information completely unchallenged and still can't make himself look good, still has a problem. And so I've met Ed Woodward a couple of times. He's a nice guy who knows nothing about football, and he shouldn't be making football decisions. Yeah, no, he's a very intelligent business guy, but he knows nothing about football. And in my opinion, given the position that he's in, he should be doing an interview every quarter. Every quarter, he should be talking to fan groups. There should be transparency at the football club. When you've no transparency, it's usually because there's things to hide. Woodward talks to investors, he talks to journalists, but he doesn't talk to Manchester United fans, and he should. And so I just feel that regardless of who comes in, Mark, the support that is being given to a manager right now at Manchester United is really quite sad, because this was never the way United did business, and we never had egotistical people in positions like this. And the overlap of business into football is a serious problem for United. And I just feel that Woodward, unless he has a clearly defined role within that football club and not a / director of football, then this is always going to be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, just very quickly, because I know I can see people in the live comments asking about that. When you mentioned the off the cuff brief that Woodward gave, can you give it a bit more clarity about that?
So if you remember, after basically, I think it was on deadline day, there was a number of newspapers who reported a story that the reason why we didn't feel Alderweireld was better than what we had. We had the breakfast with Raphael Varane, 100 million. All that was leaked by Woodward. That was a direct communication from Ed Woodward to the media to justify what had happened. And there was this constant battle between Mourinho's camp and Woodward, leaking about who's to blame for what was going on. And so this is why Woodward doesn't get attacked by the media, because they don't bite the hand that feeds them. So, and he's quite clever with that. But that was all leaked by Ed Woodward himself, and still he wasn't able to cover himself in glory, which shows he completely misunderstands the United fans and completely misunderstands why that's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a few people in the live comments as well, Phil. I'm conscious of this throughout the show, because we do get people joining a little bit late. Mm-hmm. Just a very quick who you are and what you're doing, because obviously people are like, well, who is this caller? Great points. Sure.
So basically, I've got my own podcast. I've worked out here in the United States for a number of years. I have my own radio show out here on Sirius XM, which was a national radio show for 3 years. After I left Sirius, I went to NBC Sports. I produced content, digital media content, and I've been fortunate enough to work with United for about 5 years now. Every time United come out to the US, I help promote their tours. I've worked closely with the club for a number of years now. When it comes to how they promote their US tours, they've given me incredible access to players. They've given me incredible access to the club itself, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to have an exceptional working relationship with Manchester United. But I've always retained my independence, and I don't say what they would like me to say, or anyone would like me to say. I retain my own independence, my own views. So I've just been able to work with the club for a number of years now in here in the US. And if you go back through my content, you'll see interviews with Pogba, Lukaku. You see interviews with Paul Scholes, Nemanja Vidic, Andres Pereira.
On this channel, yeah.
I had Raphael I had on a while ago. So I'm fortunate enough to be able to get access to these people, and I love it. I'm a United fan.
Yeah, and it's that independence that is probably one of the big reasons why I follow you, because you do say what you think. And some of the things you have said about Mourinho that I've seen, and Pogba, which we'll get onto maybe in a bit. I certainly want to talk about Martial. I know a lot of people in the live comments are about that. But Jose Mourinho, again, a sort of two-pronged question with this. Where were you sort of at the end of last season with Mourinho? Where are you now? And what's your feeling about what the future's going to be for Mourinho? Do you think it's going to end good or bad?
The end of last season, I was done with him. I really, the turning point for me was Sevilla away, or Sevilla at home when United went out and his comments after that, which I really felt was Mourinho advertising for his next job. It was really Mourinho communicating, this is not my problem, this is not my fault. I have no problems getting to the latter stages of Champions Leagues. This is a Manchester United problem. This is not mine. So if any potential employers are wondering if I'm losing it, it's not me, it's the club. I thought he's continuously done that to distance himself from United's failures whilst inserting himself into the success, but it's all about him. Look, he brings up some valid points, but when you're Manchester United manager, you have to accept that you are judged completely differently. It's not a double standard, it's a quadruple standard. There's nothing analogous to this at any other football club in England. So that's what happens when you coach the biggest football club in the world, or it's certainly the biggest football club in England. So he has to deal with that pressure. But there's too many things. Look, he like I said, he's got excuses to justify failure. But what concerns me about Mourinho is that the solutions to the problems that he's identified, anyone can identify problems. The hard part is a solution. Mkhitaryan was a solution, didn't work. Paul Pogba was a solution, didn't work. Alexis Sanchez looks nothing like the player that we signed at Arsenal. You look at Alexis Sanchez's stats prior to leaving Arsenal, they're exceptional. We don't see that player anymore. Fred already starting to deteriorate. Andres Pereira came back in. Now he's out. Eric Bailly on the bench for the cup final, along with Lindelof. Why are these solutions not working? That's a concern. I don't believe in the third season syndrome. In his third season at Milan, he won the European Cup, but it's very difficult to see anything other than a public meltdown, a fight with Mourinho. United will want to sack Mourinho before they get an NDA in front of him. They'll want to get an NDA in front of him so he doesn't take people down with him, but Mourinho will take people down with him, and this is the dreaded scenario with Mourinho, because you only hire Mourinho to bring success, because that's what makes everything else that surrounds him tolerable. But if he's not bringing success, then with Mourinho, the juice is not worth the squeeze, because what's the point? The success, you always compromise your principles to bring Mourinho in. But if you look at who's hired him, sorry for the long answer, Chelsea hired him. Inter Milan hired him because they'd been starved of success. Real Madrid wanted to catch Barcelona. They'd been starved of success. Yeah, back to Chelsea because they hadn't been successful. United compromised their principles, brought him in because they hadn't had success. I think it would be his greatest achievement in football if he was to deliver titles at Manchester United.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you know, I do agree. I think that I've said that, I think I may even said it on the podcast with you, that I just think it's not going to work out as much as I'd like it to work out. I think it's you're spot on that Mourinho is a title man. I mean, we've had the Rashford thing. I think we'll talk about that in a few minutes. We've had the criticism about the football. We've had the criticism about Raiola. We've had the criticism about the lack of youth. But these are all things when we got Mourinho, the videos out there that I did saying that this is not what he's here for. He's here to win the title. And in year 3, I don't think we can. I mean, the only thing that I think a lot of people are clinging on to at the moment, eager to get your thoughts on this, last couple of games, that, you know, I'm not a stat man, I don't like it, but there is definitely a difference in the way United have played against Burnley and Spurs. You know, triple the amount of chances, pressing higher up the pitch. Lukaku spoke about it, more chances created. If that continues, it's not really Jose Mourinho, is it? Do you think that's the sort of last throw of the dice for Mourinho to just try and salvage something? Or do you think he's capable of sustaining that?
I don't think Mourinho is going to change at all, regardless of what happens. He's completely confident in the way he goes about things. And if things fail, it won't be, certainly in Mourinho's eyes, because of his system. It won't be for any other reason than the players just couldn't do what he's asking them to do. Look, I think it's very difficult for Mourinho to replicate what he did at Real Madrid, what he did at Chelsea, because he just simply doesn't have the team. You can't ask a guy to win the league with Smalling and Jones at centre-back. I mean, you can't win a league with, and we've seen this. I mean, the last time United won the league, they played under Ferguson in a completely different team. They've deteriorated since then, and they've gone backwards. Phil Jones will spend, you can guarantee he'll spend months of the season out injured. Chris Smalling has always been someone that's carried in the defence. United won in spite of Chris Smalling, because you know he's going to make mistakes. I just don't feel he has the base to build on. And Mourinho's teams always start really, really strong every season. In fact, Ferguson pointed this out when they tried to catch him. The fact that they haven't started strong, somewhat down to the World Cup, of course, is a major concern because you wonder where that momentum's going to come from. It's not all Mourinho's fault, but I look at that team and it's just a mishmash of players that are individuals, and there's no cohesive team. So I don't think Mourinho will change. I don't think you'll see we've seen pockets of exceptional football in Mourinho, but it never lasts.
We're going to talk Martial. There's a lot of people in the live comments about Martial, but I just personally want to ask a question, and I'm presenting the show, so I'm just going to ask it. Paul Pogba. Any insight or any personal opinion on what's happening with Pogba and what's likely to happen?
Well, when you were asking me earlier about some of my connections, one of the individuals that I've been working with over the last year is Paul Pogba's agent. Now, everyone seems to think no.
No, sorry, I shouldn't interrupt. Mina Raiola.
Yes, no. Listen, Mina Raiola is the front for that agency. The person that runs that agency is not Mina Raiola. It's a lady called Rafaela Pimenta. She is a Brazilian lady, speaks 6 different languages, highly intelligent. She's probably about 40 years of age. And the players are very, very loyal to her. She's the person that got me the Lukaku interview. She got me the Pogba interview. And so I've been fortunate enough to enjoy a decent relationship with her. And really, you have to go back to what happened when Pogba picked up his hamstring injury, then went to Miami against the club's wishes, spent time in Miami, spent about a month out here. And there's a story in that I'm not going to repeat on the air. But Jose Mourinho, of course, vented his frustration about Pogba. He had a hamstring injury. It wasn't a mystery illness. It's the most common injury in football. And Mourinho continuously said, I have no idea when he'd be back. And so
this
these
was last
issues,
September, wasn't it? Because I remember a lot of us were like, how long is this injury going to be?
Well, he pulled his hamstring against Basel in the Champions League. And he, prior to that, was training with a personal trainer. And United didn't like that. And the fact that he was doing a lot of his recovery away from Old Trafford wasn't particularly appreciated either. And so I think United have every right to be upset at that. He's an £89 million footballer. Mourinho gave him the captaincy at the start of the season. He let him down. How can you be captain of Manchester United then a week later say you have an attitude problem going into a game? That's ridiculous. Can you imagine Roy Keane doing an interview saying he has an attitude problem? Can you imagine Cantona doing that? Or any of the past United captains, Brian Robson? That's absurd. That's where Mourinho has every right to feel let down by an £89 million player. But he's a Mourinho signing. So he has to take responsibility too. And I none of the things that made Mourinho successful at his other clubs are happening at Old Trafford. None of that player loyalty, none of that. You know, you had Lampard and Terry and Drogba at Chelsea that would have went through a brick wall for him. At Real Madrid, you had Sergio Ramos would have went through a brick wall for him. Nobody will do that at United. But more of a concern, when was the last time you saw United develop a player, improve him? That's a serious problem.
It is, and I mean, I think that I was talking about this at lunchtime on the on his press conference reaction that the reason we see the Phil Joneses, the Fellainys, the Smallings, the Valencias, the Ashley Youngs is we all know they're not good enough, but they probably are a select few players, probably with Matic and to Lukaku to a certain extent, who run through brick walls. And I think Mourinho finds. I remember the youngster Indy Boonen who left saying that Mourinho has a select group of players that he talks to and he doesn't speak to most of the squad. And you can imagine that those players are your Fellainys and your Jones, not because they're good players, but because they are, you know, players that suit the Mourinho mentality. But in the past, like you say, he'd have a John Terry, a Frank Lampard, a Drogba, quality players with that mentality. But here, he has to rely on players that we all know aren't good enough. Then
who he doesn't trust. And he doesn't trust them in big games. And you see that by the tactics that he employs in big games. He employs tactics that tell you that he doesn't trust going toe-to-toe with big teams. I don't blame him for that. It's disappointing. But 3 years in, I think United fans are entitled to expect better. Since Ferguson left, the club spent $700 million. How many of those players since Ferguson left it has been a good signing? This is, again, down to atrocious recruitment. When you look at what United are revered for today in world football, it's for their business acumen. And it's a business that happens to play football. It's not a football club that builds its economic model around trophies. This is a really important point. The owners define success by profit, not by trophies. So you immediately have an adversarial issue between fans and the owners. And fans getting upset at players not being signed, whilst I understand that, but that's not the biggest problem. And so for me, I think United are turning into an Arsenal. And the only reason why it didn't happen sooner is because of Ferguson.
You are the second. It's funny. Somebody messaged me today and said I did something on 90 Minutes at the start of the week, and they said the big thing I took from that was the City fan saying you're becoming Arsenal. You've just said it there, Phil, and it's like it's happening more and more. I know people joke about it, but actually there are a lot of parallels, and that should be a worry. That should be a real worry for Manchester United, I think. Let's talk Antony Marcel, because I know he's very, very popular on our live comments. Watch Antony Marcel. We've had the Rashford thing today, and I tweeted something out this afternoon saying, look, I understand the Rashford thing, but I don't understand it actually, because the press are talking about Rashford. Carragher's spoken about Rashford. Mourinho's got a list out to respond to Rashford. We've got this player, in my opinion, in Antony Marcel, and Rashford and Martial are probably my two favourite players at United. But Martial, for me, is double the player Rashford is. He never gets mentioned by the press. Mourinho's never questioned about him. And I think you talk about maybe, I don't know whether it has come from the club, but I think somebody's done a very, very good job on Antony Martial by turning half the fan base against a player who actually, in my mind, I mean, all I hear about is bad attitude and laziness. And I think, where's the evidence of this? I mean, what's your thoughts on Antony Martial and his future at Manchester United?
You could justify just about any argument with Antony Martial. You could justify kicking him out. You could justify keeping him. You could justify playing him. Anything. Antony Martial was identified as having an attitude issue back when he was at Monaco, whenever Leon left, and Claudio Ranieri had a problem with him. Look, great players will develop anywhere. Great players will develop in the back garden. Great players will develop playing for anybody. Where Cristiano Ronaldo would have been the best player in the world, no matter who he played for. And the reason that is the case is because when you are a professional footballer, if you want to be the best in the world, you are relentless. Carlos Tevez was talking about this, saying that he would come into United at 8 o'clock in the morning and Ronaldo was there. And he came in at 7 and Ronaldo was there. And he came in at 6 and Ronaldo was there. When you want to be the best, the fear of failure drives you to do everything. Great players are petrified of failure. I don't think Martial's petrified of failure. And I don't see the attitude inside that boy that will turn him into a Ballon d'Or winner. He has the talent. But, Mark, there's certain things you can't deny. You can't deny that Antony Martial has not been 100% committed to the football club. You've had a problem when he lost his shirt number. That was an issue. And then he's done interviews where he's talked about leaving the club. His agents talked about leaving the club. That's fine if you want to leave. But while you're an employee at this football club and you're being paid an extortionate amount of money, United fans are entitled to expect better, especially at a time when he's badly needed. Antony Martial should be looking at that United team saying, I'm desperate to get in that team. I'm desperate to help this football club. I'm desperate to deliver for these fans. Because you want to leave? Who would touch you, son? Who's going to pay 60, 70, 80 million? Pogba has the same problem. When Ronaldo's last season before he left, he was incredible. If you want to leave the club, go give me performances that actually allow me to sell you. Because as of right now, he's going down. He's not going to a better club than United. Where is he going to get a club this size, this much glamour, and have such a free, a direct line into the first team? Martial would just need to play above average, and he would be in that first team. He came on against Brighton and walked through the game. What he did over the summer was disgraceful. I don't care if you're having a baby. I'm sorry. And then taking off and coming back 4 days later, he has to take the blame for his situation. So he's not playing primarily down to decisions he's making. So Antony Martial doesn't need to ask if he wants a career at Manchester United. He needs to ask if he wants a career at top-level football. Otherwise, we're going to see another Ben Arfa, another Samir Nasri, another guy that's going to float around big teams, never do anything, never fulfill his potential. This kid has the ability to be whatever he wants. But if you don't have the attitude, Mark, talent is nothing. It's a Ferrari sitting in a garage with no engine. And either he moves or he falls apart. And I'm really disappointed in him because United badly need him right now. And his attitude's a disgrace.
It's good. I love it. I love it when somebody has a different opinion to me because, I mean, mine's no, and I respect it. I think that's the brilliance of what we do on here, and I'm sure it's what you do with your show. And, you know, that's why, you know, I wouldn't interrupt somebody who's, you know, clearly speaking about what they think. I mean, for me, I just look at Martial in a totally different light, and it doesn't mean what you're saying is wrong, but I look at it and I think here's a player who, I mean, Van Gaal was 2 years ago. I don't really like talking about it. It was a totally different player under Van Gaal.
Yes.
Before Sanchez came in, like the game before, he was the match winner. I think he'd scored 3 goals in the previous games. He'd been player of the month 3 times out of 5. And Martial and Mourinho basically just went, right, I've got Sanchez now, which is his right as the manager. He put him on the right-hand side. He basically gave him a game and a half, which I think is, having played football, going from left to right, people think you can just do it. It's like, you know, I remember him running through one-on-one against Newcastle, missing a chance, but it's different running through on the right-hand side than it is the left because you open your body up differently. And I think that, look, for me, the one thing I would agree with is that I think Martial comes across to me as somebody who, it's the wording here, he's not strong-minded. He's somebody who needs an arm around his shoulder. And I remember Mourinho saying before the Europa League final to Rio Ferdinand in an interview, I don't deal well with players like that. I want players who are strong-minded and run through brick walls. And I just think, and I said it back in April as well, I think it's unfair to say that Martial's lazy and things like that and he's got a bad attitude, because I just think that it's just not I think Mourinho and Martial, the relationship just doesn't work, and sometimes it doesn't. And I think that he's got a problem with the value. Definitely. Who's going to pay £70 million for him? Why they should. But I actually think if he went under a Pep, or he went under a Klopp, or he went under a Pochettino, you'd see a better Martial. I think the problem is, and it's not a criticism of Mourinho really, I just don't think they work well. And I think Mourinho probably doesn't like Martial as much as Martial doesn't like Mourinho. Hence, when we bought Alexis Sanchez, I thought, wow, Martial on the left, Sanchez on the right, Lukaku up front. And in Mourinho's mind, it was, yeah, he's done well for me, but actually I want Sanchez because Sanchez is, I think you'd agree, a player who, you know, never stops running. And it's not, you know, I don't think Sanchez has done well, but attitude-wise or hard work-wise or mentality-wise, running through brick walls, Alexis Sanchez delivers that. And it goes back to what you said before, which is where I wanted to bring Rashford in as well. Martial's a player who needs development. Mourinho's not a development manager as far as I'm concerned.
But wait a minute, Mike. It's not Mourinho's job. Like I just said to you about Ronaldo, if Antony Marcel wants to develop as a footballer, he's going to have to do that himself. Because first of all, United give you everything. There's very few football clubs have facilities like United. If you want to develop as a footballer, United won't get in your way. They will do everything they can to help you. But it's always down to the individual. If you go to work for any company, your boss will not be responsible for your development. You will be. You're going to be ultimately responsible for whether you succeed or fail. Now, he doesn't have to like Mourinho. Guardiola, you see in that documentary that he did where he talked about the players not liking him in the dressing room and then asked them to hate him. You don't have to like your manager. Doesn't matter. It's up to Antony Martial to set the standards that he's going to live by. And in fact, if he wants to take control of the narrative and take control of the situation, the only way to do that is by putting in exceptional performances, because then he makes Mourinho look stupid. So, in my opinion, and
it's very difficult to do that, though, isn't it?
No, it's not.
Martial,
he's been given chances, Mark. He's been given chances to do it.
In that team, I'm just bringing Sanchez in here as well. The way we've been playing, I know Martial's been given chances, Rashford's been given chances, but that team is so bad at getting the ball from back to front. I think yeah, transitions are poor, I agree. But again, Antony Martial, that has nothing to do with Martial's lack of development. The transitions were poor under Van Gaal. No one's questioning his talent. The thing that's in question with Martial is his attitude. How badly do you want this? I
you can say there's reasons for his attitude, and there may well be, but football is littered with situations with players not liking their managers and still putting in exceptional performances. I mean, look, Teddy Sheringham hated Andy Cole. This happens all the time. Ultimately, in life, if you fail or succeed, it's all about excuses, Mark. You can't. If at Manchester United, Antony Marcel should be developing into one of the world's top football players, and the fact that he isn't it's always down to the player.
Let me throw another angle at that then, because my theory on Martial has always been consistent, that I think if he was given, and he's not been given this under Mourinho at any point, I think if he was given 10 games on the left-hand side, he would grow into that role and develop off his own back. I also think if Marcus Rashford was given 10 games up front, he would develop into the striker he needs to be. But at Manchester United, have we got that capacity to do with that Rashford? I think that's maybe why Jamie Carragher was right, that he should go on loan to Everton. Pereira, a player that's been fantastic on the US tour, I'm sure you saw him. I don't think he put a foot wrong. I thought he was very good against Leicester, taken off against half-time against Brighton, dropped completely after that. You mentioned the development side of things, and sort of moving well, Martial, I think, is relevant to it as well. Mourinho, I think Mourinho's problem with youth is that Mourinho wants the ready identikit player, and you do occasionally get that when you think of a Rooney and a Ronaldo, like you said, where age doesn't define the player. But a lot of youth players, they do need patience, they do need development, and even Lindelof. There just seems to be an impatience for Mourinho to, and maybe he can't, maybe toughest test, like you said, but some of these players seem to play with fear. And I think with Martial, he's never going to be a left wing back, and Rashford will be a left wing back. They've got totally different approaches to the game, and I think it hinders his attacking sense. But there are a lot of players beyond Martial who I fear for at United. I mean, even going as young as Tahith Chong, Angel Gomez, some really... I suppose flair is the problem. Mourinho nurturing flair when they're not given chances to really... develop's not the word, but make mistakes. You talk about Pep, Leroy Sané, Champions League quarterfinals against Liverpool, played rubbish in both games, but still then subsequently played in Premier League games, because Pep's approach is slightly different, where Mourinho, throughout the team, it's not just the flair players, you make a mistake and you're out. Do you think that's right? I mean, changed his centre-back straight away after the Brighton game.
I don't like his rotation, but, the thing is that this is Manchester United. So if Marcus Rashford wants to force his way into the team, he may not get the central striking role right away. You have to earn these things. You have to actually show that you're capable of doing that. If you get into United by playing on the left or playing on the right, it's pretty common to put young players out wide. When Phil Jones was saying United wouldn't play him at centre back, they played him at right back, because the centre of the field is where the game is won and lost. And so it's quite common for players like Rashford to start out wide, then move into middle. But if you want to, again, this is down to the player. If you want to knuckle down and get those positions and own them, then you have to earn it. And so when you're talking about Lindelof, who signed him? Mourinho signed him. Who made Angel Gomez the youngest player ever in the history of the Premier League?
Yeah, Jose Mourinho.
Mourinho.
Icon,
right?
Yeah.
So Mourinho's doing this, but think about it from his perspective. Just go back to Van Gaal's first press conference when he came to United. He was asked about this. He was asked about, are you also expected to integrate youth into the team? No. My job is to manage the first team. So if Mourinho plays Rashford, he goes on a one-on-one and puts the ball wide, United lose the game. He gets slaughtered. No one turns around and says, well, Josie, you're playing young kids, so we'll give you some sort of a break. Mourinho's job is to win trophies right now. That's it. United neglected their academy for over a decade. The fact that it was in ruins was their fault, not Mourinho's fault. So you can't turn around and say Mourinho needs to integrate more kids in the first team when United neglected their academy for a decade and left it a mess and let the academy deteriorate to exactly where it was prior to Ferguson, where all the best young players were going to City. So This is not his fault. He's a first-team manager. United are so largely compartmentalised. The fact that there wasn't the quality coming through at the youth ranks. I mean, United's reserves got relegated last season. It's not Mourinho's fault. This is the way United recruit. This goes back to the fact that at City, if you're a young player, the options that are available to you are far greater than United. United don't invest in their academy, so they're starting to change that now in the last 2 years. But Mourinho's job is to win right now. Nobody cares whether he wins with United kids or not. Because as soon as United lose, nobody goes to the team and says, well, we played a couple of academy kids there, so we'll cut him a break. Nobody cares. So I don't blame him for saying, you know what, whether you're 18 or 40, it's all about ability, emotional maturity, and whether you can do what I'm asking you to do. And so I think that when you look at the guy's career, when you look at what he did at Porto, you look at the fact when he was Inter, he played young players. He played Balotelli, he played young Santon at 17. He's played kids at United. Pep Guardiola left a bench seat sitting empty and didn't play kids. Again, this is the discussion of the double, triple, quadruple standards. No, Klopp doesn't get hit with this. Nobody else gets hit with this. And once again, Mourinho, you better win with one hand tied behind your back because you're expected to play kids. Klopp's not expected to play kids. Guardiola's not expected to play kids. Any of these coaches are not expected to play kids. Once again, United are held to the standard that nobody else is. I don't blame Mourinho for pushing back on it.
No, and it's interesting as well because I get criticised quite a lot when I say I think this team needs 500 million spent on it to win the league because I think Mourinho didn't buy Fellaini. I don't like Fellaini. I don't like the style of play, but Mourinho obviously uses him quite a lot. But I think that's because we grind out results because that's what Mourinho feels is the best way to win games for Manchester United. I don't think he has the trust or belief in certain areas in the pitch to play a certain way for 90 minutes, and I think that goes. The youth's obviously important to United, but I think playing good football is really the stick that Mourinho gets beat with. But I think you're right. He's actually just trying to, he's trying to survive, isn't he? He's trying to win football games because actually that's what he will be judged upon. And I think you made a great point a few minutes ago about how Mourinho always starts well. Even at United, he always starts well. And I think that's the issue now, isn't it? Because we've lost 2 out of 4. We're going into a tough game tomorrow against Watford, and then we've got Wolves. In the immediate future, can you see us going on a run, or could you see us losing to Watford tomorrow, and what might the outcome be from that? Do you think Mourinho will make it to Christmas?
Right now, you can't predict anything with certainty because even the result 2 weeks ago against Burnley, I was approaching that with some level of trepidation, thinking this United team can be turned over at any minute because all it's going to take is 1 or 2 things to go wrong, the heads drop, and nobody on that pitch takes ownership and decides we aren't going to lose today. There's a collective resignation, and you see this when United go behind. When was the last time United fell behind in a game, came back and won it? I mean, it just doesn't happen that often. And you see all that. You used to see that all the time under Ferguson. This team is not winners. How many players in this team have won league titles? Very few. So I don't see United going on a run. I think what you see right now is more or less how it will continue. I think it's going to be inconsistent. I agree that his football is very difficult to watch at times. But I have to say, there really isn't anything that's happening here that's that surprising. Why did United hire him? United could have had Guardiola back in 2012. They decided to go with David Moyes instead. That's their fault. That's Ferguson's fault. That's David Gill's fault. That had nothing to do with Woodward. So the problem started under Gill. So the other problem is... I'll never understand that appointment. I will.
It just makes me
The reason why it happened is really quite simple. The Glazers wanted to continue on getting success on the cheap, and they saw David Moyes as an extension of Ferguson. And so they thought another Scottish guy, parsimonious, will come in, surgically sign players, and we will continue to get success with minimum investment and maximum return. That's their goal. the spending that they've been doing is not something they particularly want to do. So when I look at Mourinho, Woodwards basically sacked him at the end of the last at that leak, because as soon as you take away the ability for your boss to sack you, your employees don't respect his authority. So why would a player respect Mourinho's authority when Ed Woodward will turn around and undermine him and say, I know he said you're going to be sold, but actually I'm going to give you a new contract? How can you manage a football team like that? That's ridiculous. That's what happens at Chelsea. It never used to happen at United. And I don't care if you bring in Zidane, you bring in Sean Dyche. I don't care who you bring in. If you run your football club that way, you can still be successful, but you make it far more difficult for anyone to be successful under those circumstances. People need to know who their boss is. People need to know who they're accountable to. And if you're accountable to a guy who knows nothing about football, you don't need to be a genius to see the problems. And so for me, Mourinho will not last. I think he's going to go this season, but he's not going to make it easy for United. And this is what conversations are taking place at Old Trafford right now about his replacement and why. You know, what was the process to hire Mourinho? Why did you hire him? Other than, yeah, he's a bit good. What's your vision? How can you have a vision at Manchester United when no football people make decisions? Everyone who makes decisions at that club is a businessman. This is like having a plumber making decisions on an electrician's job. They're completely different professions, and then you wonder why you can't wire a house up properly. This is the reason. They're different professions. And so when you're having business people making football decisions, you will not get it right. So it's no surprise to me. And the 3-0 against Spurs was a brilliant advertisement to Ed Woodward about why you don't get involved in making football decisions. So until that gets resolved, Mark, Mourinho's just he's the scab on top of the underlying issue. And so we can keep pulling the scab off, but it's just going to grow back. And until United actually run this football club as a football club and not a business, and build the economic model around prioritizing winning trophies rather than down likes, retweets, and clicks, then you're going to have this problem.
I mean, to me, and I think a lot of United fans, it's clear that there's an issue, and I think some people want to bury their heads in the sand about it because of the things you've said there. Not backed in the transfer market, players getting contracts that Mourinho probably wants to move on. A manager should always be backed or sacked. That's what I believe. But on the pitch, United miss a leader. You're right. When we go down, the heads go down. That's probably down to Mourinho. He said himself, captaincy's not important, which I always find ridiculous when he had a John Terry. But the bigger picture that you talk about there, whether Mourinho goes or not, my fear, and I think a lot of United fans fear, and I don't know what your sort of insight or thought on this, is that do you think there is a plan at United? Woodward's obviously making decisions that annoy Mourinho. Do you think Mourinho's got a plan about... because it's all very confusing the last couple of weeks. You keep hearing... Mourinho and Woodward get on really well, but clearly there's a total lack of trust there. Have the club got a plan beyond Mourinho, or is it as leaderless as it is on the pitch?
The club's been completely rudderless since 2012. I mean, was Van Gaal thought out? No way. You think that anyone went and looked at how Louis Van Gaal played football and said he's right for Man United? No. He was hard because he's got success, because he's managed the big football clubs. He's a name that was synonymous with big football clubs. He fit the profile. But there was no... And even if there was a process of evaluation, who's capable of doing it? Richard Arnold? These are marketing people. These are investment bankers. I mean, you and I might as well be out evaluating managers. We'd probably do a better job. So if there's a plan, United are doing a wonderful job of hiding it from everybody. And take a look at... United would never allow this to happen on the business side. Never. Never allow this type of inaptitude and instability on the business side. So when you look at this, the lack of signings, when you look at... go back to when Moyes was hired, have United really learned anything? Have United really moved on? Have they made progress? Take a look at what they did the last 2 days of the window, right? Have a go try to get this guy. Have a go trying to get this guy. Have a go trying to get this guy. It's absurd. That's not a strategy. That's a video game. That's ridiculous. This is, as much as it kills me, City know exactly what they want. This is what we want, and we're going to pursue it. We don't always get what we want, but Guardiola is at that football club as a result of a vision. They brought in Soriano, they brought in Baguristan, and they said we want Pep Guardiola, and they evolved the football club, and they got there. Now, are United going to change? I don't have confidence that they'll change if they sack Mourinho. They're talking about Zidane. Zidane can come in all he wants. Like I said earlier, you can bring Jesus Christ into this football club and he's still going to struggle. Because the problems that exist make it really, really difficult. You cannot turn around and justify spending £90 million on Paul Pogba, then justify not signing Ivan Perisic on $2 million because you don't think he's going to sell enough shirts. That's not a football club. That's a business. That's Sports Direct. That's not Manchester United. That is ridiculous. And we all seen an Ivan Perisic at the World Cup that we would have loved to have seen at Old Trafford. So until that changes, Mark, until United actually appoint a football board to make football decisions, like they do at Bayern Munich, where actually football people, you go through the Bundesliga, right? Who are their sporting directors? Who's the guys making decisions? They're almost always high-end ex-players that understand the game. This is how top football clubs run. United, who's making football decisions? People that know absolutely nothing about the game. And if you had a conversation with these people in private, you'd walk away so disappointed and so underwhelmed that you're thinking, this is who's running this football club. So whether Mourinho goes or not is not the problem, in my opinion. The problem is much, much deeper. And we're really arguing, in my opinion, over cosmetics. Who looks good, because the problem's much deeper.
And it isn't going to change, is it? Because these people are, like you say, they're not football people. They're on the gravy train of business where we are making lots of money. But we make money because of what's on the pitch, and at some point there becomes a tipping point. But everybody in power aren't football people, and they're not going to make a decision to move themselves on. And it's very difficult to see how it's going to change unless you get a manager who can come in and do it. Unless you get another Sir Alex Ferguson who is just so good he can do it with whatever he's got.
So I want you to think about a thought experiment for a second. I want you to imagine you've got to walk into the Glazers. 2 pieces of paper, pick one. I want you to say, imagine you're going to walk in and show them a piece of paper that says, we finished top of the league, but we lost money this year. Or you can hand them another piece of paper that says, we finished mid-table, but we made 100 million. Which one do you think they'd want to read?
100% the money, isn't it? It's always the money.
Of course. All right, so their goals are financial. If you turned around to United and said, you make 100 million for finishing mid-table and 20 million for finishing top, United would prioritise mid-table. That would be the goal of the Glazers, okay? So you have this constant issue of 2 ideologies competing against each other inside this football club, because they've never found out how to merge these ideologies. They're always in competition with each other. So when you look at the goal of the business at the top, it's about profit. When you talk about finishing top 4 is a business. I'm amazed that this has somehow got this is more valuable now than actually winning trophies. But the top 4, let's be honest, that's a business goal. That's a financial goal. It's not a football goal. It's only a football goal if you use that as a springboard to bring players into your club and push on. Did United do that? Would Fred have signed if United didn't qualify for the Champions League? Almost certainly. Would Dalot have signed? Yes. Would Lee Grant have signed? Yes. Qualifying for the Champions League resulted in nothing. No advantage to United other than financial. So this is the problem when you have business goals. Ed Woodward said when he got the job, Liverpool haven't won the league in close to 30 years. It hasn't hurt their commercial potential to earn. There you have it. There you have a disclosure from this individual who runs his football club, who does not care, and who about the priority is not silverware. The priority is gold and silver. And United fans are acquiescing with this because they pay in, and there's an argument that you shouldn't protest in the stands. But if ever there's been a time to protest in the stands, it's now. It's probably too late. The ship's already sailed. But, you know, this always happens when United have quiet transfer windows. Then you get people rebelling, which actually disappoints me because that's superficial. I wish you'd actually protest the Glazers' ownership on the back of much deeper, real issues, not who they sign and who they don't sign. So I don't know. I don't expect anything to change, Mark. Why would it? Because they're making money. The only way it will change is when they stop making money. And the big thing that they're hanging on for, they're not going anywhere, because the big thing that they're all hanging on for is the financial windfall that's going to come from streaming. And they're all hanging on. This is why Premier League clubs are worth so much money. The streaming rights that are going to come, that are already coming, are going to dwarf anything that you see now. Just quickly on that, what you're going to see in a couple of years, you're going to get an a la carte menu where, you know what, I'm going to pay $2.99 every week to watch Man United, rather than paying to watch all the games. Now, they're looking at this like El Clasico. A billion people watch El Clasico, Barcelona, Real Madrid. Imagine you can get a billion people to pay £2 to watch a game. You've just made $2 billion on one game. That's a bigger windfall than the entire financial compensation from the Premier League for television rights per club. That's where it's going. That's what's going to happen. And Amazon and all these big guys are already getting involved. And so the Premier League TV rights was the shortest contract ever with the renewal. So they're not going anywhere.
No. And the thing that really crowns it off, from the fact that they have no idea of football, is if you are a club that is focused on profit, you don't go and appoint a checkbook manager who needs to spend lots of money to be successful, which Mourinho is. It defies logic, but, you know, as you said, one hand behind his back. I just want to read a few comments out. Rishi says, a mentor is the most important part of anyone's success. Matthew McFadden says, never heard truer words on Martial. All the talent in the world, needs the commitment to back it up, and we've lacked that at times. And Bio20, Jose chose Jones and Smalling over Bailly and Lindelof. It's Jose's fault. But, you know, I've got to say on that
I agree with him on that.
Goes on behind closed doors, and I do think it comes down to the fact that he trusts players that have a certain mindset, and I think, as Phil sort of alluded to, it's about winning games, and I don't think Mourinho trusts enough of his players to go and win games of football. Go on.
I'm just going on that point. You talk about the back. Look, last season, not this season, the season before, Mourinho gave Woodward a list of 9 players that he asked him, that he said he will have permission to leave the football club. The fact that they're still there isn't Mourinho's fault. It's Woodward's fault, because United will not accept taking a hit on these players in the same way City would. This is where City have a massive advantage over United. So the fact that he's still having to trust or rely on Chris Smalling, a player he's told repeatedly can leave, Phil Jones, same thing. The fact that he has to rely on Darmian. And see, this is your problem with Mourinho. Telling Woodward to sell players, do you trust him to sign a replacement? Because I don't. So it's a terrible situation. Let me say this in my defense of Mourinho. I don't like him. I don't think he was right for United. I don't think they should have hired him. I look forward to him leaving. I don't know if Zidane's the answer. But football is still about entertainment, because everything else about it defies logic. We shouldn't be paying extortionate amounts to watch these teams. We shouldn't be indulging all the egotism that surrounds the game. We shouldn't be indulging everything about how much money all these people surrounding the game, who are parasites, make. We continue to take massive ticket price increases. The prices, shirts. The only person that gets screwed in football is the fan. And we do all this because clubs know that none of it translates to logic. It would never work in any other industry. But the fans are always the ones that get screwed, but they are still the ones with the most power, because when advertisers are giving United money, they're giving them money. Why are they giving them money? Because United are going to these sponsors and saying, you can buy into fan equity. So if you give us 100 million, our fans, or 5 million, whatever, our fans will buy your product because you're supporting our club. But the minute that changes, and this is why that banner will have bothered Woodward so much, The minute that changes, where the relationship is not symbiotic with the football club and the fans and starts becoming adversarial and starts becoming a problem, then sponsors start to get spooked. Sponsors don't give money because no longer you can trade on fan equity and say, oh, okay, well, just by affiliation, people are going to buy AIG insurance. I don't know anybody that says, oh, they sponsor my football club, I'm going to go buy that, right? But it's important for brand development, and so that is United's goal. That's what they do. They're a massive business, trading on the back of George Best, Dennis Law, Bobby Charlton, all the greats of the past. That's what they're trading off, and so it's a very concerning situation, and it's a football club that Mourinho is not progressing anymore, but do they have the intelligence and the leadership above Mourinho to get themselves out of it? Because I think they need a leader off the pitch as much as they need one on it.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I don't have confidence.
It is. You know, I mean, I say it's going to be interesting. It could be another depressing couple of years. But I think one thing United fans do have is hope and belief. And
of course,
I just think you're right. I think we need football people, stroke more importantly, United people ingrained into that club all the way through the three tiers of manager, team and higher up. And at the moment, I don't think we've really got any of it at any level. And that's the concern. The fans are the ones, and you touched on it there, the apathy and hypocrisy of fandom in general. It's sad because without fans, you don't have football. Without fans, you don't have big wages. Without fans, you don't have Sky Sports. We are the lifeblood of football, but we cannot cohesively gain a big enough voice to do something about it, and they're fully aware of that.
That's where fans need to put tribalism aside and say we all have a collective interest here. And I don't care if you're a Liverpool fan, an Arsenal fan, and United fans should not be taunting Arsenal fans if they're paying £100 in to a game, because what's going on there, and you can bet your life on this, other clubs are looking at that and going, well, if Arsenal can do it, so can we. And that's just pushing the market up. Fans need to understand how powerful their voice is collectively. Look, Schalke, I think it was Schalke in Dortmund. The average price of a ticket, it's a derby in Germany. Average price of a ticket is around €12. Schalke upped it to €18. Happened a couple of seasons ago, 2 or 3 seasons ago. And the Dortmund fans completely boycotted the game. The day before the game, they brought the ticket price back down to €12. And the Schalke fans supported them in the boycott. That's where United fans need, and other fans, instead of, oh no, I'm an Uber Red, I will not miss a game, I'm always going to back the shirts, I won't boo the manager, I won't do any of that. Look, I'm not saying that's something that you should be doing every week. But if you've got people inside the football club, because the people come and go, the football club is bigger than any one individual. If you've got people inside your football club that are toxic, you should boo them. You should let them know that they're not welcome. You should go after them. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Phil, it's been a very, very enjoyable hour, and I hope, and I suspect everybody in the live comments or who is going to watch it will agree with that as well. So, Smee, please do drop a like on the video. It'd be great to get you back on again, because we could just talk for hours. Please do drop a like on the video, everyone. If you want to pick up a bit more of me and Phil, as I said, Beyond the Pitch podcast, I've put the link in the video description. It's me doing more of the talking on that one, so you might not enjoy it, with Phil putting the questions to me. We spoke about everything, didn't we, really? We spoke about the general Manchester United, but also social media, bullying, the background of the United stand, some really, really good stuff. And I thoroughly enjoyed it, like I have done tonight, doing it the other way around. But I'm very eager again, Phil, just to give a shout out for your social media and things like that, so people are aware of where they can find you.
Yeah, and once again, Mark, thanks for doing it. And a massive thank you to the number of people who reached out and gave us feedback on that. It's one of the things that I value the most, is feedback from listeners. And I know it's hard. People are walking dogs in gyms and all that down when they're listening to these things, and they're not always on social media. So I appreciate those who took the time to comment and realize that as human beings, we're all in this together. So trying to bring attention to the toxicity at times of the internet and social media, and remembering this is just football. Nobody needs to be bullied over anything. even if you disagree with somebody, you can passionately disagree, but don't get personal. I don't have a problem with people passionately disagreeing, but I've appreciated you coming on and doing our show, Mark, on Beyond the Pitch. You can catch me at Beyond the Pitch, or my personal account is at Malakians. That's MALACHIANS. You'll see a lot of United content on there, and United interviews from time to time with past and current players, and occasionally guests like yourself. So thanks to all of you folks for downloading the show and listening to Mark's show and continuing to follow this gentleman. And thanks for having me on, Mark. It's been a pleasure.
No, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's one of the better shows that we've done. I mean, all the shows are good, but it's very rare that I don't talk much, but actually, can just sit and listen and be engaged, which is obviously why I follow you anyway. But yes, if you want to pick up that Beyond the Pitch podcast, which is, I mean, there was another one out today I saw as well. Links in the video description for that. You can listen to the one I did, and then there's a big list of things there as well, and I really do advise it. And do give Phil a follow on Twitter at Malakians, like he said, especially over the transfer windows. He does a really good sort of 5 minutes updates, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope everyone else has as well. It'd be great to do it again throughout the season. So thanks very much for coming on, Phil.
Cheers, mate. Thank you very much, Mark, and all the best with you in the future. And thanks to all of you for following the feedback. Much appreciated, mate.
Cheers. Thank you very much, Phil.
Cheers,
and thanks everybody for watching tonight. Really, really good show. We move into now tomorrow, which is going to be fan cams, match reactions. We'll be live from about 4:30 with the team news as well. All the talking's over. It's the football is what defines us, and I think it's going to be very, very interesting. So drop a like on the video, give it a watch, give that podcast a listen to as well, and I shall see you all tomorrow. Get a good sleep, because it's going to be. I'm nervous about tomorrow. I'm nervous. It's a big game for us, and we never know what we're going to get with United. So let's see what we get. Thanks for watching. Speak to you all soon.